Thank you very much. I think related to decentralization and centralization, I think we can connect to the concept of inclusiveness as well, because one difficult point of centralized governance is that obviously, well, this is centralized. So, what about the people of the voice of the people in marginal areas? They are obviously voices that can be really hard. Then I think in order to think about it, inclusiveness can be one really important concept. Maybe well, you don't have to limit your argument to just your expertise, but do you have any idea or like comment thoughts on inclusiveness or yeah?
It's really hard because I think if you there this is what we talk about in my class, and there is no actual easy answer, right?
Mm.
So as an example of how a decentralized system might actually increase voice, if you imagine an electoral system,
Yeah.
Where individual neighborhoods vote rather than sort of a general election, right? Where you have ward elections, and then you're going to have voices bubble up in each one of those neighborhoods or each one of those wards. If you have a general election and everybody comes to vote in that general election, you're going to have more of a majority voice that takes over that election. So the higher that you get, the more that you get centralized. And so we've had for years we had a system of individual local school districts, right? And then now we have some different kinds of systems that exist. We have systems where mayors are in control of entire cities. So again, that lessens that representation of the minority voices, the marginalized voices. And then as you go higher to a state control, and that the more that's centralized. However, that's not always good either. So what happens is if you have a decentralized system and you have people who have needs or interests that aren't getting met in that decentralized system because the local community doesn't value difference or doesn't value things that those particular students need, there is nobody looking out for that community or that population. In a centralized system, you may create laws or protections for people across the board that allow for that make it so that you have to address the interests or the needs of those students with differences. So that's where the tension lies. So just as you said earlier, you can't say one is better than the other, right? Each one presents its own dilemma. So if we are so decentralized that we are only focused on local communities, you can imagine that this community over here looks very, very different than this community over here. So a student who is in school here is not getting the same education as the student who's getting here, right? So then do we need something that protects, like the Individual Disability Education Act? Some law that protects people, that protects their civil rights. So those are the tensions that I think we see in those things.
Right. Yeah, one interesting concept that was kind of different, and also maybe the quality of education or access to education. I think this is really important. I'm thinking about not necessarily in the city of Tsukuba, but in Japan, we witnessed we are experiencing the depopulation, so decreasing of population, and related to education, one big issue is school, and the number of schools is decreasing, and then as a result, what happens is that, well, I don't know, just hypothetical, in city or like village A, there used to be 10 schools, let's say, but it becomes like 4 or 5. Then what it means is that students need to kind of go to school, which is not necessarily close, but they need to go really far away. then these kind of things. This is just one example, but what is really indicating, and also about, so for students' perspective, I think this is a bit difficult too, because if you can just walk for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, then you can go to school, I think that would be good. But if it takes, I don't know, 40 minutes also, then this is really stressful for students. So I think this reflects the how education can be can affect to students. But at the same time, from the kind of teachers or schools perspective, I think this makes sense to make kind of effective, operation of schools, because if there's one school, there must be, you can't, well, no single teacher can teach every single subject. So if there is one school, there must be a certain number of teachers. So, but still, like another issue is that the number of teachers are really decreasing in Japan too. So I think education is very important. Well, you can say this is related to human rights, but in order to realize it, you need resources, and resources are kind of really realistic, argument. So, well, this is just what happens in Japan, especially in rural areas. But I don't know whether this happens in the United States or not. Like, yeah, do you have any resources?
So it sounds like you're talking about consolidation.
Oh yes.
So that idea that, to be a more efficient system,
Yeah.
you consolidate school districts to create bigger school districts,
Yeah.
and then close out those that don't exist.
Mm.
It's a very difficult move, and it's certainly one we've seen. Chicago closed a lot of schools.
Okay.
Not too long ago, Columbus actually is in the process of closing schools. And so the idea is that, if in fact you have these big buildings and you have not enough students in them, you can't. In our system, the money for education follows the student, right? So if students are going into other like charter schools or other private schools or leading district schools, that also takes money away, right? So then the idea is if we close schools, we'll be more efficient because then we'll have students, filling up buildings and going. But you raise really important questions about what that means. Students have to be bused for maybe much longer time, but it's also a matter of a breakdown in the relationships in the schools themselves, the relationships that students build with teachers over time, or relationships that students build with other students in that community. So it's really a breakdown of that community, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to get around. And so while I think we all recognize the need to think about financing and efficiency, we can't forget about the humanity of it all either, and how that affects communities.
What do you mean by humanity in this context?
Yeah. So just the nature of being an individual, a student, the relationships that we have with one another, the emotional health of students, the special needs that students and communities might have, that families might have. How do those get met in these new spaces?